Hey everybody, John Fenn here, Church Without Walls International, CWOWI.org. We are a house church network, as you know by now. Check us out. But today I want to get right into the teaching, which again deals with common sense and the Lord leading, this time the process of elimination. Have you ever been in a place where you know the Lord has brought you to that place and that position, but then he stops talking? You ever been there? He leads you into a job. He leads you into a position. He leads you somewhere. Maybe it's a church. Maybe it's volunteering in a church. You know that he brought you there, but then he's silent. This has happened to me. This happened to me years ago when we moved. I was a pastor of a church in Colorado, and I kept feeling led. We knew changes were coming, and the Lord kept talking to me about being a Bible school director for a church Bible school. And I mean, I had the city of Tulsa, I had the church, all of that from the Lord and confirmed from the Lord. But when we moved, they did not know I was to be the Bible school director. And so the timing wasn't there. And it was almost 2 years. It was about a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half before I went on staff. So what did I do in that year and a half or so? Well, it was a process of elimination. It was like what we're going to look at here with Samuel checking out the new or selecting the new king after King Saul was rejected. It's the episode where David gets selected as king. And what happened was in 1 Samuel 15, Samuel is sent to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem. And the Lord says, I've provided for myself a king among his sons. And so Samuel goes there. And, that's the Lord talking to him. He knows he's supposed to go there. In verse 6 says he looks at the oldest son, Eliab. He says, surely this must be the Lord's provision. And I love verse 7. It said, don't look at his countenance, don't look at the height of his stature, because man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. I've rejected him. And then it goes down, and there are 7 sons in total that are brought to Samuel to see if they are selected by the Lord. And Samuel says no. And I love verse 11. And he says, okay, I'm at a dead end. This is like, I know that I've been brought to this place, but everything that the Lord brings across my path is a no. You can go into a job and it's like, should you apply for this position or that position? Then you may get a no on that. Or it may be denied if you apply for that. It could be a program in a church that you want to volunteer for, and things happen. And it's frustrating because you know that the Lord has brought you there, but then he's silent. And it's a process of elimination. Well, what happens finally down in verse 11, he says, is this everybody? Because none of these guys is who the Lord chose. And Jesse says, well, there's one more, the youngest, he's out by the sheep. And Samuel, I love it. He says, call him, because I'm not moving. I'm not sitting down. And he says, we will not sit down until he comes. And when he comes, of course, the Lord says, this is him. Now, it's interesting how the Lord did not say to Samuel at the start, hey, go to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem, and his youngest son I've chosen to be king. He didn't say that. He just said, go, and I'll show you among his sons. So the Lord wanted Samuel to go through this process of elimination where the Lord is silent. And it's just like you and I coming to a place where in our lives, and we know the Lord has brought us there, but then he goes silent on us, and we have different options put before us. Nothing bears witness. Nothing seems to be the Lord. It's like, what am I doing here? Well, I want to show you in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, which is very similar, situation that guides us in this. This is when Israel is wandering around in the wilderness, and they're on their way to the promised land. Actually, this is chapter 9. This is before they reject the Lord, and the 10 spies come back with a bad report, and 2 come back with a good report. So this is early on in their wanderings, but here's what it says. It says, this is Numbers chapter 9 and verses 15 through 23. It says that there was a cloud that came over the tabernacle, and it was a pillar of fire by night and a cloud during the day. And it says this in verse 10, when the cloud stayed a long time on the tabernacle, many days, then the children of Israel obeyed the Lord and did not move or did not go forward. And when the cloud was a few days, they stayed in their tents, according to the commandment of the Lord. And when the cloud lifted up, it says in verse 22, whether it was 2 days, a month, a year, wherever the cloud was on the tabernacle, they stayed there. And they lived in their tents there. And at the commandment of the Lord, they stayed, and at the commandment of the Lord, they went. And it says in verses 19 and 20 that when the cloud settled, they pitched camp. And when the cloud lifted up, then they got their things together, and then the cloud would move. Now, what this is telling us is this: look at the pattern. You are the tabernacle. Okay, you have Christ in you. You've got the presence of God in you. So the presence of God is in your heart. But there's a time when the Lord wants you to move on. When that happens, it's like the cloud lifts. And what I mean by that is you're still at that job, but there's no grace to continue in that job. You're doing it, but there's no grace there. And you're going through a process of elimination, kind of like what Samuel went through with Jesse's sons. It's like, what is it me or what? I just don't have the grace for this job anymore. Should I get a promotion over here? Should I look for a new job over here? And the Lord is silent on it. But what happens is you know in your heart that the cloud has lifted up. Now, in ancient Israel, when the cloud would lift it up, they would start preparing. They're like, okay, gather the livestock, pack up our clothes again. Let's get ready to take down the tent because the cloud is lifted up. It's not moving yet, but it's lifted up, which means it's preparation time. And so when the cloud lifts up, that's when you prepare. You know, in the natural, you get your resume in order. You check into things, job openings, and you start praying about where you'd like to work next or whatever the case is. I'm using this as a job example. That the grace just isn't there to do this anymore. You could be volunteering to help somebody. You could be volunteering in a church. It could be a job. It could be any number of things where you know that the Lord has sent you there, but then he goes silent. And you go through process of elimination and you stay there until the Lord reveals himself and what he wants, like Samuel did with David and Jesse's sons who were brought before him. But there are times when it's like, okay, now that David's here, I need to move on. And there are times where you're doing a job and you just don't have the grace there. And that's the best way. I don't know how else to say it, that you've done the job. You know that the Lord brought you there, but suddenly it's like the cloud is lifted up and his presence for you being there is gone. And you just don't have the grace for it. It becomes drudgery. It becomes difficult. And I understand, like with Samuel, that drudgery and that, like, no, not this son, no, not this son, no, not this son. And you're there in that work, and it's like, I'm going through this. I'm thinking maybe I need a different position within the company. Maybe something else is going to happen. And you're trying, through process of elimination, and the Lord is silent until finally Jesse comes. It's like, oh, this is it. And so it could be a promotion within the company. It could be someone from the outside says, hey, I want you to work for me over here. You don't know what that provision is. But we can tell that the grace has lifted. We can tell that the cloud has lifted off of us. Where you're in that job, you're in that volunteer position, you're doing whatever it is. You go in there, you know it's God, and then he goes silent. But suddenly one day, then the cloud lifts. And you know that the grace for doing that job is no longer there. And you wonder what is going on. And you go through a process of elimination in your mind, kind of like Samuel with the boys. Eliab, no. Shammah, no. You go through all these sons, 7 sons, and finally you come on David, who's going to be the king. But it's all there because you sense that the cloud is lifting. You know that the Lord sent you there, but suddenly the cloud lifts. You don't have the grace. And then, like in Israel, in Numbers chapter 9, verses 15 through 23, the cloud would then move, and they knew that it was time to move, and they had prepared themselves. And so when the cloud lifts up, folks, that's when we prepare ourselves. It's not that the Lord is being silent. It's that he's given you the sign in your spirit on the inside. The cloud is lifted up. So prepare. Do what you know in the natural because a change is coming. All right. I hope this has been a blessing to you. Numbers chapter 9, verses 15 through 23, and 1 Samuel chapter 15, the selection of David as the new king. All right. God bless. Bye-bye.